Imagine this. You're standing in a vast field just before dawn. The fog is thick, muting the world to a hush. No landmarks, no signs, no path. You feel a strange sensation in your chest, not panic, not peace, but a low, dull ache. A weight pressing down without a name. You've been walking for what feels like years. Each step feels heavier than the last. You can't remember where you started, and you don't know where you're going. All you know is that you're tired, not just tired, but weary, deep in your bones. But the worst part isn't the fatigue, it's the shame, because every time you stop to rest, some voice inside you whispers, "You're lazy, you should be doing more," and you believe it. Maybe you wake up each morning with good intentions, to finally write that thing, finish that project, clean that space, apply for that job, reach out to that person, but by evening, the day has vanished and you're left scrolling through your phone, avoiding mirrors, resenting your own reflection. But what if you're not lazy? What if what you've called laziness is something else entirely, something misunderstood, mislabeled, and far more complex than a lack of willpower? What if, "I'm just not motivated," is actually a quiet cry from the deepest part of you that's been lost, unseen, unheard? What if the reason you procrastinate isn't because you're unworthy of success, but because you have no idea what direction to walk in anymore, and so standing still feels like drowning in slow motion? What if your struggle isn't a character flaw, but a consequence of being buried beneath 1,000 competing voices, parents who told you what success looks like, teachers who measured your worth by test scores, influencers who sell purpose like it's a subscription, a society that praises productivity but starves meaning? What if you're not broken, but disoriented? Not weak, but unanchored? And here's the most disturbing question. What if your so-called laziness is actually your soul refusing to take another step in the wrong direction? Let that land. What if your body is not betraying you when it says, "No more," but trying, desperately, to protect you from a life that isn't yours? See, there's a difference between being unmotivated and being misaligned, between being unwilling and being unclear, but the world rarely makes that distinction. Instead, it slaps a label on your forehead, lazy, unproductive, disappointing, and expects you to keep moving anyway. But imagine asking a traveler why they're not making progress when they've been handed no map. Imagine blaming a sailor for drifting when no compass was ever given, and the stars are hidden behind clouds. Now ask yourself, how much of your struggle is really about effort, and how much is about orientation? How much of your paralysis is truly resistance, and how much is your intuition saying, "Not this"? Here's the deeper pain no one talks about. You might be expending more energy judging yourself for not moving than it would take to actually find a new path. And still, you stay stuck. And still, the shame grows. So you double down. You read self-help books, sign up for productivity hacks, download habit trackers, watch motivational videos. But they never stick. They never quite sink deep enough to reach the place that's actually hurting. Because it's not discipline you're lacking. It's direction. It's not ambition that's missing. It's alignment. You don't need more hustle. You need clarity. You don't need more pressure. You need purpose. And yet, every time you slow down to question where you're going, the voice inside barks, "You're just making excuses." So you move faster, work harder, burn out quicker, until you collapse again in that same tired place, wondering why you can't keep up with everyone else, wondering what's wrong with you. But what if that's the wrong question? What if nothing is wrong with you at all? What if the world has convinced you to run a race you never signed up for, and now you're wondering why your legs keep giving out? What if your inner resistance isn't a flaw, but a compass? What if all this friction is a quiet form of truth trying to speak to you through fatigue, boredom, and avoidance? And what if the real tragedy isn't that you haven't moved, but that you've forgotten why you ever wanted to move at all? Hold that question, let it echo, because the answer isn't simple. But it starts with peeling back the surface shame, and seeing what's really hiding underneath. Now, let's go there. Think back to the first time you were told you were lazy. Was it when you didn't want to finish your homework? When you spent an afternoon just staring out the window instead of doing something productive? Or was it later, when the career path you were supposed to follow didn't excite you, and your hesitation was interpreted as indifference? Words like lazy are weapons wrapped in concern. They sound like critique, but they cut like judgment. They are often not about your nature, but about your non-compliance. Not about your lack of ability, but your refusal, conscious or not, to conform. But what if this label, this idea of laziness, is not rooted in truth at all, but in a deep misunderstanding of the human spirit. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." And society? It's built to encourage that avoidance. Let's pull back the curtain. At the root of this so-called laziness is not a lack of effort, but a fracture in identity. A disconnection between your inner compass and the external demands imposed upon you. You're not idle because you don't care. You're idle because you've been pushed so far from your authentic self that the path forward no longer feels like yours to walk. It's not that you won't move. It's that you can't move without betraying yourself. Enter the modern dilemma. You're born into a system that tells you what to value: success, status, certainty. You are taught to measure your worth by outputs: how fast you respond, how much you achieve, how hard you hustle. But what happens when your soul doesn't want any of it? Arthur Schopenhauer argued that much of human suffering comes from the futile pursuit of desires implanted in us by outside forces. The more we chase these illusions, the more hollow we become. And when we finally slow down long enough to feel that emptiness, we label it laziness, when it is in fact a kind of existential rebellion. Nietzsche took it further. He saw modern man as disoriented, a creature who had lost the ability to create meaning from within, relying instead on inherited systems of value. In a world that no longer believes in divine purpose yet demands constant motion, we are left with a void. And in that void, motivation dies. Jean-Paul Sartre would say you are condemned to be free, burdened by the responsibility to define your own essence. But what if that freedom feels more like vertigo than liberation? What if standing before infinite possibilities causes paralysis, not because you lack direction, but because you were never taught how to choose your direction in the first place? It's easier to call someone lazy than to admit that our systems, educational, economic, social, are designed not to nurture individuality, but to mold conformity. This is the hidden force, a deep psychological wound that forms when your true self is forced to live behind a mask of usefulness. The philosopher Alan Watts warned against confusing being with doing, insisting that our value cannot be reduced to what we produce. Yet we continue to conflate action with worth, and inaction with shame. So let's examine that inaction. When you procrastinate, when you scroll endlessly, when you stare at the ceiling feeling guilty for not doing enough, what's actually happening? Are you truly choosing idleness, or is your nervous system trying to protect you from a path that no longer feels safe, meaningful, or aligned? Consider Viktor Frankl, who survived the Holocaust and still believed that the search for meaning, not comfort, not success, is what keeps the human soul alive. He said, when a person can't find a deep sense of meaning, they distract themselves with pleasure. Laziness, then, may not be a lack of discipline but a lack of direction rooted in misaligned meaning. It is the psyche waving a red flag, signaling, we've lost the thread. Stop. Recalibrate. But recalibration takes courage, and time, and silence. All things the modern world teaches you to avoid. You are told to move faster, optimize everything, achieve more. And when you fall short, blame yourself, hustle harder, download another app. We are, as Aldous Huxley observed, amusing ourselves to death, pacifying the soul's unrest with distractions instead of confronting the real source of the dis-ease. So you drift, not because you're lazy, but because you've been severed from your internal North Star. Not because you lack energy, but because your energy is being siphoned off by obligations that do not belong to you. Imagine a compass needle shaking wildly, trying to find true north but spinning amid interference. That's you. That's many of us. And yet, we punish the spinning. We medicate the unrest. We shame the paralysis. But what if the paralysis is sacred? What if the stillness you're trapped in is not a symptom to fix, but a doorway to pass through? A sacred pause in which your real self is trying to whisper, this isn't it. There's something more. When you feel that ache, the one you can't explain, the one that feels like restlessness mixed with sorrow, it's not your laziness speaking. It's your longing. Longing for something real, something true, something that resonates with the quiet frequency of your soul, rather than the loud demands of the world. And until you find that frequency, every task will feel like dragging your feet through mud. Every goal will feel like a performance. Every day will feel like you're pretending. That's not laziness. That's dislocation. You are not unwilling. You are unanchored. And if you want to move again, not just go through the motions, but truly move, with fire and conviction and clarity, it won't come from trying harder. It will come from remembering who you are beneath the noise. And to do that, you must first see the trap you've been caught in. The invisible web of expectations, fears, and narratives that have defined your choices without your consent. Because once you see the cage, you can begin to imagine a key. And once you imagine the key, the prison begins to crack. Let's look now at what this invisible prison has done to you, and to all of us. Let's walk into the unseen consequences. You wouldn't notice it at first. That's how it works. The cage isn't made of bars, it's built from soft things, praise, pressure, patterns. It wraps around your choices like an invisible thread, pulling ever so gently, making sure you don't wander too far from what's normal, what's expected, what's productive. And because it's invisible, you don't resist it. Not at first. You simply start to shrink. You laugh a little less loudly. You reach a little less boldly. You speak your truth with just enough hesitation to dilute it. You wake up not with dread, but with emptiness. And somehow, that's worse. This is the unseen consequence of being called lazy. When what you really are is lost, you begin to believe it. And once belief settles in, it seeps into everything. Your thoughts, your posture, your breath. You start editing your dreams before you even speak them. You talk yourself out of ideas before they ever touch the world. You hold yourself hostage in a life that doesn't fit, because somewhere along the way, you confused stillness for failure, and urgency for virtue. This confusion is not an accident. Modern culture is engineered, meticulously, to keep you moving, reacting, producing. A still mind is dangerous. It asks questions. It listens too deeply, so the system keeps you distracted. Social media is the cathedral of comparison. It offers dopamine highs and silent despair. Each scroll reminds you of what you're not doing, not becoming, not building fast enough. It whispers, look at them, look at you, keep up. But here's the terrifying truth, most people you're comparing yourself to are also lost. They're just better at hiding it, or too afraid to stop. Because stopping feels like sinking when you've built your identity on speed. And so, you stay in motion, even if the motion is meaningless. You overschedule, overcommit, overconsume. You stay busy, not because you're ambitious, but because you're afraid of what will rise in the silence. This is what psychologists call avoidant coping. You feel disconnected, overwhelmed, uncertain, so you flee into distraction. Not out of apathy, but out of self-preservation. You are not running from your dreams, you're running from the existential discomfort of not knowing how to reach them. And here lies the most dangerous consequence. You begin to dissociate from your own life. You become a ghost with a calendar. A mind full of tabs open but no real thoughts being followed through. A soul with layers of armor, trained to smile on the outside while decaying within. This disconnection shows up in subtle, insidious ways. You forget what excites you. You lose the ability to make decisions. You start fearing even small risks, because failure would only confirm what you secretly suspect, that maybe you're not cut out for this life at all. But that's not the truth. That's just the echo of long-term spiritual starvation. Because when you go too long without direction, real, soul-rooted direction, your entire being begins to close in on itself. Not to punish you, but to protect you. Your nervous system, trained by years of performance-based love and transactional worth, enters survival mode. You experience what's known as functional freeze, not the dramatic kind of trauma where everything collapses, but the quiet erosion of vitality. You do just enough to exist. You smile just enough to avoid questions. You live just enough to not feel dead. It's death by 1,000 tiny compromises. And no one sees it. They just call you inconsistent, unmotivated, flaky, lazy. But inside, you're screaming for something to matter again. Something to stir you, to make you feel like you belong to yourself. That's the cost of being misaligned. You betray yourself slowly, silently, every day. Until one day you wake up and realize you can't feel anything without a screen in your face or a deadline breathing down your neck. You begin to chase artificial urgencies just to feel alive. You respond to notifications like they're prayers. You tie your worth to metrics, followers, income, steps taken, hours clocked, because the alternative is terrifying, having to face the vast, empty expanse of meaninglessness. But here's what society never told you: meaning doesn't arrive as a thunderclap. It emerges slowly, quietly, in the spaces you've been taught to ignore. When you stop chasing the next thing, when you sit with the discomfort, when you finally ask, not, what should I be doing, but, what wants to be born through me? And yet, even now, you might feel a whisper of resistance. A voice saying, this is soft, this is indulgent, get back to work. That voice isn't yours. It was planted in you by a world that profits from your disorientation. A system that functions best when you are confused enough to buy your identity and exhausted enough to never question the transaction. But your soul knows. It always knows. And it's been trying to get your attention in the only way it knows how, by making you unable to move forward until you remember where you were trying to go. So the next time you find yourself slumped on the couch, phone in hand, mind numb, heart heavy, don't ask, why am I like this? Ask, what have I been running from? Whose path have I been walking? What would I do if I trusted myself completely? Because here's the deeper paradox, you're not lost because you stopped. You stopped because you were lost. And stopping, in this world, is an act of quiet revolution. But you can't stay here forever. The cost is too high, the soul too precious. You were never meant to simply exist. You were meant to create, to build, to feel, to walk in alignment with something bigger than obligation. And that begins the moment you choose to rebel. So, let's talk about the rebellion. So you've stopped, not by choice, perhaps, but by necessity. Your body quit before your mind could rationalize another excuse. Your spirit, exhausted from dragging a dreamless frame through days that felt like déjà vu, demanded silence. And now here you are, still, uncomfortable, disoriented. Good. This is where the rebellion begins. Not with noise, not with a burst of motivation, but with the choice to sit in the wreckage of everything you were told you had to be, and not run from it. Because in this society, silence is subversive, reflection is radical, and choosing to slow down, to unlearn, to dismantle the lies you were given about your worth, that is revolution. But how do you rebel against something that lives inside you? How do you fight a voice that sounds like your own? You begin by doubting it. Doubt is holy. Doubt is where false narratives go to die. Ask yourself, who told me I had to earn rest? Who decided that worth is measured in output? When did doing become more important than being? You'll find that most of these beliefs aren't yours. They were installed, passed down like heirlooms, wrapped in fear, coated in shame. Teachers, parents, institutions, media, all with the same underlying message: don't trust yourself. You must be shaped, corrected, made useful. Rebellion begins the moment you reclaim your inner authority. Because here's the truth, you do not need to be fixed. You need to be found. And finding yourself isn't about becoming something new. It's about remembering what the world tried to make you forget. Remember when you used to move without self-consciousness? When your curiosity didn't need to justify itself with a career plan? When you danced for no reason? When you wrote stories without wondering who'd buy them? When you built things, dreamed things, destroyed them, and started again, not out of panic, but play? That wasn't laziness. That was alignment. That was freedom. And the fact that you drifted from that? That's not failure. That's conditioning. You were trained away from yourself. And you can untrain. But it won't be clean, or linear, or easy. This rebellion is messy. It looks like uncertainty. It feels like grief. You will mourn the self you never got to be. You'll rage against the time you lost performing lives that weren't yours. You'll ache when you realize how long you mistook discipline for disconnection. But every revolt has its rupture. And this rupture, the moment you stop trying to be good, successful, productive, impressive, is sacred. Because from here, you get to choose. Not based on fear, not based on shame, but from desire, from resonance, from truth. So start small. Not with a 5-year plan or a morning routine or 100 affirmations taped to your mirror. Start with this question: what do I want to feel today? Not what should you do, not what must you achieve, what do you want to feel? Peace, joy, aliveness, flow, curiosity. Good. Now reverse engineer your life around that. This is not about indulgence. This is about alignment. When you follow what enlivens you, you become someone who naturally creates, contributes, expands, but from fullness, not fear. This is how you break free. You stop outsourcing your compass. You stop waiting for permission. You stop chasing what drains you just because it's familiar. You begin asking dangerous questions. What if the version of success I'm chasing is actually a trap? What if discipline without desire is just a slow death? What if the real reason I can't stay consistent is because my goals were never mine to begin with? You begin rewriting the script, not editing it, not tweaking it, burning it, starting with a blank page. And on that page, you don't write what sounds good, you write what feels real, even if it scares you, especially if it scares you, because fear, when it's not tied to trauma, is often just truth dressed in resistance. You begin experimenting instead of executing. You turn goals into games. You turn shame into curiosity. Instead of saying, I can't stick to anything, you ask, what does my inconsistency reveal about what's out of alignment? Instead of saying, I'm lazy, you ask, what part of me doesn't feel safe moving forward? Instead of punishing your resistance, you learn from it. You make rest part of the process. You make joy part of the process. You make you part of the process. And slowly, quietly, your life begins to shift. Not in grand gestures, but in daily revolutions. You say no without explaining yourself. You choose projects that feed your spirit. You leave spaces that require you to abandon your essence. You speak the truth even when your voice trembles. You become someone you recognize. Not a product. Not a brand. Not a cog. A self. A sovereign. A force. And yes, people will misunderstand. They'll call you lazy again, or selfish, or unrealistic. They won't know what to do with someone who refuses to contort. Let them be confused, because the point of rebellion isn't to be understood, it's to be free. And once you taste that freedom, even in a fleeting moment, when you create without agenda, when you breathe without guilt, when you choose without fear, you'll realize something quietly, devastatingly beautiful. You were never broken. You were buried, under expectations, under roles, under noise, and now, you are digging yourself out, clawing your way not toward some grand destiny, but toward wholeness, toward truth, toward the kind of life that doesn't need to be performed, because it's lived, and that is the most dangerous, powerful rebellion of all. But the rebellion isn't the end, it's the beginning of something deeper, something final, something eternal. Now, let's step into it, the ultimate truth. There is a moment, somewhere between the old life crumbling and the new one forming, where time stands still, not in the poetic way, not like a sunrise or a first kiss or a dramatic movie pause. No, this moment is quieter, harsher, more honest. It comes when you finally stop asking what to do and start asking what you are, and the silence that answers you. It isn't empty, it's ancient, it's the sound of truth returning, because here is the final, most devastating realization. You were never meant to be a machine. You were meant to be a mystery. You are not a sequence of habits and hacks designed to optimize output. You are not a self-improvement checklist. You are not a productivity graph to be studied and tweaked. You are a field of storms and sunlight, chaos and quiet, destruction and rebirth, over and over again. You are not lazy. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are becoming. And becoming cannot be rushed. It cannot be systemized. It cannot be monetized. It is messy. It is sacred. It is yours. The final lie they told you, the one that hurts the most, is that your worth is conditional, that you must prove yourself to exist, that rest must be earned, that love must be deserved, that happiness must be purchased. But the truth is simpler, wilder. You are already whole. You don't have to climb out of some inner failure. You don't have to constantly apologize for your existence. You don't have to turn your healing into a performance. There is no finish line. There is no external validation that will make you more real. There is no version of yourself waiting on the other side of burnout. You are here, now, breathing, and that's enough. You were lied to, yes, but now you get to live the truth. And here it is, the truth that terrifies those who profit off your confusion. Stillness is not stagnation, it's revelation. Confusion is not weakness, it's inquiry. Fatigue is not failure, it's wisdom screaming through your cells. You thought you were falling apart, but you were actually falling inward, to the place you abandoned when you became what they needed. Inward, to the voice that never stopped whispering, even when you drowned it in deadlines and doubt. And now you've heard it, maybe faintly, maybe in a dream, maybe in a moment of total collapse, but you heard it. The whisper said, you are allowed to live a life that makes sense only to you. And that one sentence, that single sacred permission, is the doorway. Through it, everything changes. Because the truth isn't just that you're not lazy. The truth is that you are deeply alive. You care so much, it paralyzed you. You feel so deeply, it overwhelmed you. You dreamed so wildly, it scared you into stillness. And the world called that laziness. But it was volume. It was intensity. It was depth. You weren't avoiding life. You were waiting for life to feel true. And now, for the first time, maybe it does. Because truth doesn't roar. It doesn't demand. It doesn't perform. It arrives gently, through breath, through longing, through the question that refuses to die. What if this life could be different? Not more productive, not more impressive, just more real, more you. That's the final rebellion. Not changing your life so you finally feel worthy, but realizing you were worthy the whole time, and letting that truth reshape your life from the inside out. This is what they never taught you in school. This is what no career counselor, no boss, no algorithm could ever offer. Because no system designed to control you will ever tell you how to be free. But now you know. You've seen behind the curtain. You've tasted the truth. And once truth touches your tongue, everything artificial becomes bitter. You can't go back. You can't return to grinding for validation. You can't chase goals you never chose. You can't betray your spirit just to please a system that never had your name in its heart. Because now you know, you were not lazy. You were lost. And being lost, that was sacred too. Because in that wilderness, you found the map no one else could give you, the map back to yourself. Not the self they praised, not the self they approved, not the self they could monetize or mold. The wild, vast, uncontainable self. The one who creates for joy, the one who rests without guilt, the one who dreams without apology. You're not lazy, you're just returning, you're just remembering, you're just beginning. So here, at the end, which is also a beginning, let this be your vow. I will no longer abandon myself in the name of achievement. I will no longer punish my body for feeling tired. I will no longer apologize for needing stillness. I will no longer chase someone else's dream and call it purpose. I will return to breath, to being, to truth, to me. And when the world says, you must earn your worth, you will smile, not with arrogance, but with remembrance, and say, I already have. Then you will walk away, not to escape life, but to finally, fully enter it. No longer numb, no longer lost, no longer waiting, just here, now, alive, exactly as you were always meant to be.